Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Matt again, and I am here with Josh and Rob, and we have a ghost writer of sorts, ghost participant with us here today, Stephen. Some of you may remember Stephen from when we started the So What's Your Take podcast. Josh, I, and he were part of that. And oh my God, I used proper English. Somebody slap me.
Look
No, I'll
at
just find
you
something to throw at
go.
you.
Yeah, please. I can't do that twice in a row. Anyway, Steven's going to listen in this week and just get caught back up to speed. We're going to try to bring him back in. I'm going to try to use the word a lot less as I talk. So, anyway, just for some stupid humor. We're going to try to start doing some other stuff too. So, you may notice that we're all remote, so to speak. Two of us, three of us are in the same room. Josh is remote again, but we may start throwing some remote all episodes in where all of us are in our own environment and we bring in guest speakers and things like that. So we'd love to know in comments, however you want to do, just let us know how you like it. We'll experiment with the format and the layout. This week, we're going to bring in a different episode. We were talking about it on the last episode, and it kind of piqued all of our curiosities. And Stephen even had some thoughts on this one. So we're going to talk about the supernatural of the Bible. Now, there's going to be some crossover on this episode where we're going to talk about the supernatural of the world and how it relates to the supernatural of the Bible, but we're not going to get into the fiction. We're not going to get into all that. We're going to stay with biblical things that are referenced. I'll throw out a couple of examples right off the gate. Leviathan, Behemoth, Nephilim. I actually had to look up the pronunciation with Stephen earlier today just to make sure because somebody pronounced it Nephilim, and I was like, okay, now I feel stupid.
so I'm guessing that somebody was you.
No, well, it was actually a biblical scholar pronounced it Nephilim, and I'm like, have I been doing this wrong? So Stephen's like, I think it's Nephilim, and I looked it up, and it's Nephilim. So for all who are unaware, that's one we're going to be talking about, and then we're also going to talk about a couple of things biblically, such as witchcraft, sorcery. There's some references to things like that in the Bible. We hope you enjoy this. This is, again, Rob. Stephen is in ghost mode, and Josh Warren is remote. We try not to use last names, and I just broke the rules. So, hey, Josh, how are you?
Well, when they come for me, I'm blaming you.
Yeah. He lives at, no, we're not going that far yet. But by now, most people who are
1800
following us
Pennsylvania
know.
Avenue.
Yeah, like, send all hate mail. Thank you for that. No politics, but that one was well timed. All right, so we'll just throw this out right out there. We're gonna try to control the format a little on this because we could go wild with this. But the main thing is going to be what does the Bible say about them, and then we're going to talk about what we think about them. Do they exist today? Keep in mind, all of these topics are gray areas of the Bible, so a lot of this is going to be not a definitive answer. It's just going to be, hey, this is what the Bible says. This is what we think. This is some other supporting information if that's where we throw it. So I want to start with the one that I think has the most context biblically, and that is Leviathan. So I did minimal research on this. I'll be honest, I was on vacation, but I did a little bit. The first thing I see biblically, and I'm going to throw this to Josh first, is there are multiple references, and that's why I was saying that has the most context about Leviathan, and all of them reference a creature of the sea. Am I mistaken in that? Is everything biblically referencing a sea creature of some kind?
From my knowledge, yes.
Yeah. In Psalm 74, Leviathan Leviathan is a multi-headed sea serpent killed by God and given as food to the Hebrews in the wilderness. In Isaiah, Leviathan is a serpent and a symbol of Israel's enemies,
but not necessarily a sea serpent, just a serpent referenced there.
Yeah,
now, on the other one you mentioned, the Psalm one, is that a prophetical revelation or is that a real? It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan and gave it as food. This isn't a psalm, so I imagine this is probably not a reference to a real world event, but either a prophetic statement or just a what do you take that as, Josh?
It's one of those things I would, more or less believe that it may be kind of, just with it being a psalm, it may be more of a metaphorical thing. But then again, it's a gray area thing. It could be that, it was actually a real sea creature that was killed by God. But I think, as we look at, I think one thing too, like a theme line to keep as we're looking through all of this, and you kind of already mentioned this, Matt, is, that to stay within that biblical context of, what is God trying to teach us through the different uses of these, supernatural creatures, beings, whatever it may be that we talk about, really understanding what is the purpose of Psalm 74, what is the purpose of, why God did this. That would be kind of where my brain goes when I look at stuff like this.
So here's a question. This is kind of where I'm going to go each time. What do you think, and I'm going to ask this to both of you, what do you think Leviathan is as or was? What was it, and what do you think? Is it still around?
That depends on if we take Leviathan as a literal creature or as a metaphor. Looking at the redemption of Israel in Isaiah 27, says, "In that day the Lord with his hand and great strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and will slay the dragon that is in the sea." So both references that we have would first off be a sea creature, a sea serpent of some kind.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Now, with that being said, what is Leviathan supposed to mean to us? I think Leviathan is supposed to be something that we see as God's provision over sin.
Okay, so you're going strictly metaphorical. What about you, Josh?
Yeah. Also Leviathan is also mentioned in the book of Job. It's mentioned in Job 41, where it writes, "Can you draw a Leviathan with a fish hook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever?" I'm probably going to more or less agree with Rob that it's more of a metaphorical thing, just because of the way that the text reads about what Leviathan, kind of what it's representing, and what it and just kind of the way that the different references that we see in Scripture, kind of the context of where it's in.
That's fair enough. Let me give you a flip view of it, though. The call it the devil's advocate. The people of this time had the Torah, the correct me if I'm wrong, Torah, the first 5 books, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So they had that. They are familiar with a serpent based on the Torah. So my question is this someone's just visualization of a serpent, and with the understanding that the serpent in Genesis did speak and trick? Could this have been a sea snake that they just translated as Leviathan? I guess I'm just throwing it out there. Could this have been their understanding of a creature that really did exist? They just named it and personified it, for lack of a better word.
If I was to take a stab at that one, I would say the likelihood of that would be that they saw like a giant squid or a colossal squid or something like that and didn't understand the body of it, because it says it's a multi-headed sea serpent. Yeah. And when I think of a multi-headed sea serpent, I think you look at the tentacles on a large squid or a colossal squid or a giant squid one, it looks like they've got hooks on the ends of their hands. I mean, they look like heads. So perhaps that was just the name given, whether it actually be a serpent or something that was seen as a serpent.
What do you think, Josh? Do you think still keeping the purely metaphorical, or do you think the door is open to a potential real creature with just a re-personification of something they knew?
I definitely think it's very possible that, in that time they could have seen, any number of things that could be, in the ocean. The scary thing is that we've explored like 10% of the ocean. So, there's so much that we don't know that's there, that if you take it from, that time, there wasn't as much activity on the ocean as there is now. So creatures may or may not have been more freely moving around close to the surface. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely open that they saw some kind of large, sea monster or whatever. And it could have been what they used to kind of personify into this. But yeah, I definitely think the door is open that it could have been a real creature that they used as metaphorical language within also.
All right, rubber meets the road. You got to throw a dart and hit a board. Does this creature still exist today in your mind?
I mean, if we're saying, also going to say no.
And let me give you my reason for saying no, because it said that God vanquished Leviathan and fed him to his people as a sustenance in the desert, or in the wilderness, not the desert, but the wilderness.
Which that brings a different question. I don't know if we can go in too deep on it, but Leviathan is always thrown as a name / identifier for a specific creature. It's rarely, if ever, in my understanding, biblically referenced to a race of creatures or a species of creatures. It is, this is Leviathan. You know, like you see Leviathan.
Like he's got a name. Yeah, it's that specific one.
So that's where I kind of fall into it's probably a real reference to a prophetic event that they assigned a name or a personification of something that they knew or something that had been talked about. Call it a mythological creature to them, but they put A and B together to make Leviathan. But that one's definitely a gray area to me. But in relation to Leviathan, there's another reference to Job 40:15-24. Behold, Behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold, his strength in his loins and his power in the muscle of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like bars of iron. He is the first of the works of God. All right, I want to stop there and reread that. Okay, he is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword. For the mountains yield flood, food for him. Sorry, my eyes are tripping today. And all the wild beasts play. So I'm not going to dig in on that. But my point is, all right, of the first works of God, biblically, Josh, where are we coming from? Are we talking about first creation, literal?
That would be my assumption when it says first creation of God. That would be, I mean, you could also look at it as, first creation of God. Does this mean before or after, the flood with, new animals coming after the flood? We talked about that on the last episode. But, naturally, if it says of God's first creation, then I would assume that this is talking about, actual creation when God created everything in Genesis 1.
Let's unpack that statement you made very quickly. You said after the flood, new animals. My understanding, there were no new creations after the flood. It was. Are you talking about something different than that?
No, misspoke of what I was meaning on that.
Right.
No, I not like there's not like new animals that are created, but like when I meant new animals, I meant like as the repopulation of the
planet. Okay.
Animal species was happening. That was what I meant by that. Thank you for making me clear that up.
I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you for making me clear that up.
All right, so of the first of the works of God, I fall into the same boat as Josh on this one. Rob, do you feel the same?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's just go back to this, and I'm going to make the reference, the Supernatural series that we were talking about. They bring in all this non-biblical stuff, so we're not going to go into Eve and all that, but I'm talking about first of the works of God, these things that have been here longer than anything. You know what I'm talking about? It could be dinosaurs. Could this be a remnant dinosaur? Could this be a remnant creature?
Which is another episode we need to tackle. The dinosaurs and where they stand, and
which we did that one. We did dinosaurs, but we probably need to dig in further on it.
I think the only thing we discussed was that it was most likely that the dinosaurs were killed in the flood. I don't think we went.
I'll have to go back and reference the notes on that one. That might have been before you came on. I think that was So What's Your Take? That was me, Stephen, and Josh did that one. There we go. Me, Stephen, and Josh. I'm back.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Redneck. All right. So we did delve into that a little bit more, but we can revisit that and maybe go in deeper. But back to the question. Do you think first works of God, is this some non-mythological creature, but some creature that exists at their time anyway, was still left over from prehistoric, we'll call it, times? Or do you believe this was an actual roaming creature that they just didn't know how to classify?
I think it's possible that it was something that was left over, but I've also seen people equate the behemoth to like a hippopotamus.
I've seen that
something like that.
But the problem with that was they went into specific details on one of them, and it was
right.
About it had scales and all this other stuff.
Right. Yeah, and so that's why I don't more or less fall into the assumption that it is a hippopotamus. I think that it could have been something that was left over from, more prehistoric time.
Well, and Stephen and I were talking earlier, and we just kind of bantered and tossed this out there. But we were talking about. I actually called it a Gila monster, but he corrected me, and I remember. I'm glad he did. It was the Komodo dragon came to mind.
Uh,
The land roaming
yeah,
creature that kind of resembles a big fat alligator. Mean, aggressive.
yeah.
Probably wouldn't have been common, but if they saw one, it would have freaked them out. So I
Thing would
think along
freak
the
me
line.
out if I saw one.
Yeah.
I know people like that.
Yeah. People with scales, people that are aggressive, that bite. Yeah.
Oh.
For sure. So I think Behemoth has the lesser of the amount of references and things like that. So that one, and here's another one. This is for the next supernatural being. So we'll kind of segue into that. But I go from Behemoth to the next least frequently referenced one, which is the Nephilim. So this one's got a little bit of meat to it. So I want y'all's opinion on the Nephilim. So it is my understanding, and we actually have a staff member here who just did a thesis on multiple things, but the Nephilim were high on the list, and I've had some good conversations with him. I think the main reference on the Nephilim was in Genesis, where it talks about the sons of God began to lay with, have relations with the daughters of man, and that in itself is pretty clear cut. I mean, that's not man laying with woman. That's something other than man laying with woman, creating a being that I would classify as supernatural. And let me take a step back real quick and talk about supernatural just to make sure that everybody knows where we're going with this. We're classifying supernatural as anything that is otherworldly, other than natural. So I know that seems kind of vague, so I'll specify it. First, this is man is natural, animals natural, plants are natural, things that are physically of this world. Things that are not of this world that exist in a spiritual realm or some other fashion, or people in the physical world can interact with things that are not of the physical world. That's where we're scoping the supernatural discussion, is things that are not of the physical nature of this world. So anyway, flipping back on that, there's just a little clarification there. The Nephilim. So we've got the sons of God. Give me your thoughts. Rob, you first. What is sons of God? Who are they?
The sons of God would have to be the angels.
What specific angels?
Probably the fallen angels.
That's what I'm shooting for.
Just based on context, I'd have to say probably the fallen angels.
The ones that existed on the earth at that time that had fallen from heaven, had not been banished yet. Josh, what's your take on that biblically?
God, yeah, I would, more or less probably follow your guys, that they're, angels, specifically probably ones that are fallen, the fallen angels that have been, kicked out of heaven after the great battle that we see when, Satan thinks that he is better than he actually is. So yeah, I'm in line with you guys.
So following the logic here, that says at some point there was a battle in heaven. Satan overstepped his bounds, fell to earth, brought other angels with him. These angels, we'll call them the sons of God because that's what it tends to be leaning toward, exist on earth at this point that they're referencing. So they're walking the earth and they are having relations with daughters of man, women on the earth, and creating a being. That seems to be the most common interpretation of the Nephilim, is the child between an angel and a human, a fallen angel and a human, to be more exact. So there's a couple of things there. One is kind of related to this, brings in demons as well. They're supernatural as well, based on that definition. So is a demon purely a fallen angel that hasn't transcended into hell yet? What is a demon? Qualify that for me, Josh, biblically.
Biblically, you're asking me fun questions today.
Yeah, this was the week.
Yeah. There's so many, everybody has this, whether you admit it or not, you have this image in your brain of what Satan, demons, and angels are.
Yeah, most of that's Disney. Thanks, Disney.
We see Satan is pictured as this little dude dressed in red with a pitchfork. Demons are, clunky, funny, not really smart things that follow along behind Satan. And then angels are these beautiful creatures dressed in white, playing harps on clouds and all of that. And that's just, if you look biblically, that's just not what we're told. Somebody told me this one time. He said, if angels are so brilliant and pretty, why is it every time one appears in the Bible, the first thing that they say is, "Do not be afraid," or "Fear
Yeah,
not"?
genuine terror and fear ensued. Yeah.
And so, obviously, I've never seen an angel, so I can't tell you what it looks like. But for me, a demon is something that is the definition of evil. It's evil. It's you're trying to put a face to what a demon is. My thing would be, a demon is evil. It's working actively to subvert the will of God in people on earth any way it can. But demons are also, by nature, we see in the New Testament, they're very quick to call out to Jesus that he is the Son of God, but they're also fearful of when Jesus is near them. I mean, we see this with the man who is cursed on the island, or on the shore, when Jesus and the disciples come ashore, and the demon known as Legion is asked to be cast into
the
pigs, and he goes into pigs, and the pigs run off into the sea. You see that demons like to work more or less in the shadows and in the dark of trying to actively subvert what God is. So that would be, biblically, to me, that is what we see demons are and what they do.
So a couple of questions. First thing,
Okay.
The Legion incident, I actually had a point on that, and I like it as well. Everywhere that I've ever seen a scenario like that painted in the Bible, to me, it acts as if the demons don't want to go back to hell, perdition,
Exactly.
whatever you want to call it.
Exactly.
They exist on this earth to try to escape hell.
Right.
And
Yeah.
like when Legion told Jesus, "Hey, let me go into those pigs. Don't send me back to hell or wherever I need to go."
Yeah.
That to me speaks to demons don't want to be in that place. They're
right.
So I guess that begs the question. That it's an interesting point as I was making, but that begs the question. Again, I'll spell it out in black and white. Are demons fallen angels, or are they a separate species?
Let's see.
And let me clarify one thing before we get an official answer from both of you. This is I don't personally believe there's a right or a wrong here. I just think it's an interpretation. But here's the thing I wanted to clarify. The Bible references a lot of what would call demons as spirits, not demons. So what I'm clarifying there is they had a spirit of muteness. They had a spirit of whatever that forces convulsions. To me, there's a definite distinction between a spirit and a demon, like we would qualify it. The spirit, to me, is the overtaking of someone as evil, but that's where I've always been confused, because is a demon possessing the person, or is it a spirit, and a demon would be a fallen angel that is an actual race or species? So I would like y'all's thoughts on that.
Well, we're talking about angels that followed Lucifer, or that followed Satan to rebel. And in Revelation 12:7-9, it shows Satan and the other fallen angels were defeated, and as punishment for their rebellion were cast out of heaven. That's Revelation 12:9. Also Luke 10:18. Satan became the prince of demons, and the other fallen angels were hurled to earth and ultimately condemned to hell.
So right there's a delineation. There's the fallen angels were condemned out of heaven, but Satan became the prince of demons. Are those two the same?
What that would tell me would be that that the fallen angels are what demons are.
Yeah, that would
or at
be.
least that's in the context that I read.
And then in the context of what he read, and then of just reading through some like biblical scholars of what that do systematic theology study work. Wayne Grudem, for example, is someone good to read on all things theology. He talks about that he says that we may define demons as following. Demons are evil angels who sinned against God and who now continually work evil in the world. So according to Grudem's definition of what a demon is, it is an evil angel who sinned against God. So to me, that would be the fallen angels.
That's a good clarification. I like that. So that cleared it up for me. So I like that. So in my view, that means there is a finite number of demons. They're not birthing other demons. If they are a truly fallen angel, then that means there was a certain number that came with Satan, and then when they are perished, which they may never perish, they're eternal beings. I mean, unless God Himself perishes them, there will not be new demons. Fair statement?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything to argue against it. So,
okay, well, y'all aren't getting the point of this conversation. I was just playing. Well, that's cool. So that's the one I was interested in, was the Nephilim. So we've validated that demons likely are, based on biblical context, fallen angels, and that they laid with female humans and created a giant, which is the way they reference them more than not as giants, creature. This can trickle down biblically into races such as the Philistines that were giants. We don't know if they were Nephilim or if they were just big people. I mean, it very well could go both ways to me. But the question I'm going to pose is the extreme gray area question that I think we want to get to, and that is, take all of the supernatural creatures you've heard of, even extra biblically. Could some of these be explained by something like a Nephilim? So I'm going to throw a few out there. Yeti, Sasquatch. There's name 10 more, but the point is big. Well, yeah, same. But the point is, there are so many races, even outside the Bible, that reference giants with powers. Could just be strength. You don't know. But there's even one, the staff member that I was talking to was talking about a story of and I have to go look it up again. It escaped me. I meant to. It was the giant of some city over in Iraq or Iran, and I can't remember. And the story was that he lived in a cave. Does this ring a bell, Josh? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do not. All
right, I'm going to find that one and ping on it in a future episode. But the idea was there was multiple accounts of people who said that there was this creature who lived in a cave, and literally they would send armies in after him, and no one would come out alive. And this creature had supernatural abilities, and it finally died or something. I don't know the whole swarm, but the question was, could this have been like a Nephilim, a modern day Nephilim that just lived?
It the giant of Kandahar?
That's the one. Kandahar, okay. Afghanistan.
That's Afghanistan.
Yeah. I knew it was one of the war-torn areas. I was trying to remember which one. Yeah. So the giant of Kandahar was basically, they tried to go after this thing, and multiple people died, and they sent militaries in after it and stuff. And so I don't know the whole window of it, but
there's one report that says that the U.S. Special Forces killed allegedly a 13-foot tall enormous creature who dwelled in Afghanistan's highlands.
That's the one right there.
So
yeah, so we're not talking about little podunks with pea shooters. We're talking about Special Forces went in and had to bring this thing down. So we don't know much about this creature, but I guess the point in the question I'm trying to ask is, do these things possibly still exist today in the form of mythological creatures that we say don't exist, but they very well could? Y'all's thoughts?
I believe that God has created some pretty amazing things. And I think that we have not scratched the surface on our knowledge as human beings as to all of the things that He's created. Especially when we start looking into things like creatures of the sea, when we haven't seen but something like 10% of it. I mean, we're still finding new creatures that are being discovered. So, I mean, I look at this the same way I look at the giraffe versus the unicorn. Which is more likely?
Oh, yeah.
A horse with a horn or a giant camouflaged brontosaurus with hair and a purple tongue? Well, you know what? If God created one, and He obviously created the giraffe, I mean,
we see it still active.
I've fed one at the zoo.
That's a fair point.
There's no telling what other things He's created that we don't know about yet, and that may or may not be brought to our attention in the future. And that being said, there's also a lot of species that are also extinct.
Mhm.
The dodo bird, the condors. I mean, you're looking at things that there's scientific proof that they existed. I mean, they existed within humanity's time. So
Yeah, this is fair. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I am always, 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 when you ask me one of these gray area questions, going to answer in the same similar fashion. I am not going to put God in a box. I am not going to say that he can't do something because he is God. Um, I would err more or less on the side that probably most of these things don't exist anymore. Um, but then again, who knows? Maybe the U.S. Special Forces did kill some kind of 13-foot monster in the caves of Afghanistan. Maybe there is something that lives in the national forests in Washington state that make people go berserk and hunt for Bigfoot. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I'm going to say that there is a possibility that some of these things could still exist in areas that we just don't frequent as much as um, humans. But as technology improves and as the world grows smaller, we may begin to get more answers to some of these questions that we've been asking for so long. So maybe in the future we can do an episode where we say yes, Bigfoot does indeed exist, or we can say for once and all, no, Bigfoot does not exist.
Yeah.
But
the
I do
hate mail that
think.
would come in on that. Oh my
Oh, I know
goodness.
though that would be.
Yeah, I'm not willing to make those calls.
But I do think that it does say something about our minds as humans, as created beings, that we are always curious as to what else there could be, um, and that God gave us that curiosity, so that we may lean more or less more onto Him and what He can show us through His wisdom, that He would grant us, so that we may know um, what is true. But I do think that these are discussions that are important to have as we look as two things that are referenced in the Bible that sometimes people look at and go, "Yeah, I don't want to touch that," and they just keep reading. I do think it is important to have these discussions.
Yeah, and I like them personally just because my mind is the curious mind. There are.
Yeah.
I don't want to revert back to the Middle Ages, the Crusades, where
No.
you
Yeah.
can't even think outside the
Right.
box.
Exactly.
So I agree with your statement fully on
Yeah.
that. Well, transitioning from that, I think we're not going to answer the question, does Bigfoot exist, in this episode,
Yeah.
but it's just to pose the question, do you believe that he could exist based on
I
these
will
types
tell you
of things?
something that I am becoming more and more convinced that does exist. I will tell you that I think that megalodons do exist with more stuff. The more stuff
Hollywood
they
says
keep.
it, so I believe it.
Well, not just that, but all the different like research that's starting to come out of like what they're starting to find. I'm getting more and more believing that there is some kind of 40-foot shark swimming around somewhere that I do not ever want to come upon.
Well, also consider they've got sharks that they have aged at about 600-700 years old that are still swimming around. So
yeah,
here's
exactly.
the way I look at that, and it's a different perspective. All right, so God creates man, creates all the creatures, creates everything. We've done the creation episode.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's very well possible in my mind, and it just keep in mind, this is me. This is not even scientific or anything, but when he first created everything, the world's populated. There's unlimited food.
Mm-hmm.
So is it very possible that some creatures got really stinking big? You know what I'm saying? Before man came and started, poaching the world. Can you have a big whale? Can you have a big shark? Well, yeah, they had unlimited food sources and very few predators. You know what I'm saying? There's a big freaking ocean
perfect
creature.
example of this. The deer around here. The deer around here are the size of dogs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You go up to New York, like on Long Island,
they're big,
where the deer don't get hunted because, well,
yeah, let's not go there.
But they don't get hunted. So
They're
when
bigger.
you see a deer up there, you see a deer total a car here and a deer total a car there. It's a whole different kind of total.
Yeah, and this is
exactly.
to me, moose. Moose are the same thing. These are beasts by most people's standards. So I can very well see somebody writing these books back then seeing these massive creatures, and they're like, oh my goodness. And we're like, there could never be that. When you have very little competition, and like you said, no rules, yeah, anything's possible. So I'm like you, Josh. I believe there was a megalodon. Is there one today? Possible. If he's smart, he's staying deep in the ocean, and that's probably why we don't ever see him. And then you see weird stuff like when Hollywood to the side, you see these fish that glow and have no eyes. And then people are like, well, that can't be a fish. Really? You hanging out down there? You know the rules of the ocean?
The funny thing, and I know the fish you're talking about the angler fish, right?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing about that is, and I saw this on a meme, and it warped my mind. It said, I spent my whole life thinking it was the size of a Nerf football, and then you see a picture of it, it's like 8 feet long.
Yeah.
Those things are monsters of the sea. So guess what? It fits right in with these creatures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's go from that into a different topic. It's still related, but I want to talk about the less creature side of the supernatural of the Bible and talk more about the human aspect of it, specifically sorcery, magic, things like that. So a lot of people obviously just straight up magic doesn't exist. Well, I mean, there's biblical references that prove that some form of it did exist. There's a couple things I want to attack angle wise, and one is it driven from the evil side? Is it driven from a godly side? So let's start there. The first ones that come to mind to me are the witch of whatever the name is. Forgive me, I had it in my head and I forgot it. Trying to find
Talking about the Wicked Witch of the West.
No, yeah. Like I said, thanks Disney and Hollywood for all the bad references in my mind thing. No, this was the biblical reference. It was the witch that brought Samuel back from the dead to Saul. Oh. I want to say Endor, but I'm in Star Trek mode clearly. So it's E something. Oh, sorry about that, guys. I had it ready and I'm trying to find it again quickly.
I know what you're talking about.
Here we go. I got it right here. Find me a woman who is a medium. Endor. It is Endor.
It is Endor. Yeah, you were correct. It is Endor.
I thought it was Endor, and I'm like, all right, I've
You're
just been
correct,
watching too much Star Trek. So the Witch of Endor. So basically, my understanding of the story is Saul saw a Philistine army. He's terrified. He wants this witch, which he had just basically easy now.
No. It's okay. Go back and watch replay. You're talking about Endor, and you're like, yeah, I've just been watching Star Trek. I was just like,
Star Wars, bite me. I'm a Trekkie and a Trekker and a Star Wars. I get them all mixed up. So Saul sees this incoming army. He had basically put out a death warrant on all mediums and divinators and all of this. And then he needs one. And he goes after one. Typical biblical story. All right, let's kill everybody. Crap, I need that, So he goes after her and he says, find me this woman. She's terrified. Well, you're going to kill me. He promises he's not going to kill her. And she actually gets Samuel. I don't want to use the word resurrected because I think she's just summoning a spirit at this point. So this brings in a lot of questions, guys. Is Samuel alive? Is he dead? Is he in Abraham's bosom as the Israelites understand? Is he with God? Let's start there. So this is sorcery. We're going to get back to the sorcery, but I want to figure out what she did, clarify what she did. Samuel responds to Saul and this witch, and it's biblically made very clear that this is Samuel. It is Samuel responding to Saul. He knew him. He knew the questions to ask, and he knew the correct answers, and Samuel even referenced God. What's your thoughts on this? Josh, you first.
I am attempting to find this story very quickly.
Made him look something up
in the Bible because I want to give the context of why Saul was doing this, and I know where it's at. I just gotta find it.
This is 1 Samuel starting in 28, roughly.
Samuel 28. Okay.
While he's getting to that, Rob, what's your thoughts? Who is Samuel? What is Samuel?
Okay, well, we know Samuel was wow, my mind has just gone completely blank. A prophet that was obedient to God's will. And so, I mean, we're definitely talking about a real person. Yeah. Now, at that point, I believe Samuel had already died.
Samuel is dead at this point.
So nobody can really resurrect other than Jesus himself or whoever he gives the ability to. So we're not talking about a resurrection here. We're just talking about a divination here.
Yeah.
So that would lead me to believe that Samuel, wherever he is, whether he's in heaven, wherever he's at the time, because to be absent of the body is to be present with the Lord. So I'm saying it was probably some kind of a channel opened up. And I don't think it was the sorceress that did it.
Supernatural.
No, and I don't think it was the sorceress that did it. I think the way I would see that playing out would be God's will is for Samuel to be able to give this information. So he says, okay, go find this medium. And
all right, hang on before you bring your point on this. If that were true, and I'm being the devil's advocate here, if that were true, this woman who is clearly identified as a divinator, a medium, has clearly talked to spirits before because they sought her out because of her abilities that were well known. Did God allow all of that or some of this approach from the evil side, and she's doing it through sorcery outside of God's will?
Okay, here's where I'm going to go with that one. It was God's will that they seek her out.
For this particular instance.
Right.
But she had done more beyond that, in my view, was outside of God's will because she was witchcraft, sorcery. Josh, you got what you were looking for?
Yes, I found what I was looking for. Okay. Context of what all is going on. So, 1 Samuel chapter 28, the Philistines have gathered their forces and surrounded Israel. And so starting in verse 6, it says, and when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him either by dreams or by Urim or by the prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, seek out for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, behold, there is a medium at Endor. So Saul disguised himself and put on other garments and went, he and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night, and he said, divine for me by a spirit, and bring up for me whomever I shall name to you. And the woman said to him, surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the mediums, and she goes through all of this. But Saul swore to her by the Lord, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. Then the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring up Samuel for me. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. And the woman said to Saul, what have you deceived me? You are Saul. The king said to her, do not be afraid. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see a God coming up out of the earth. And he said to her, what is his appearance? And she said, an old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a robe. And Saul knew this was Samuel, and he bowed with his face to the ground and paid homage. Then Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? And Saul answered, I am in great distress, for the Philistines are warring against me, and God has turned away from me and answers me no more, either by prophets or by dreams. And he goes on by, having this conversation. He has this, small conversation with Saul, or with Samuel, I'm sorry. And then it says in verse 20, then Saul fell at once, full length on the ground, filled with fear because of the words of Samuel, and there was no strength in him, for he had eaten nothing all day and all night. So we do see that this woman does bring forth Samuel. That is clearly laid out for us in the text. My questioning of that is what part does the Lord have in this? And what was the reasoning for allowing this? Because if Saul is outside of, if he's out of right standing with God and he's going to a secondary source to get this information, what is the Lord attempting to teach through this? Would be my question. This is
I
not
can definitely
one of those.
See a scenario painted here where God has used a burning bush, God has used signs.
Right.
This can be just another instance of God saying, Saul, you You're not listening to anything else I'm saying. You're not right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make this unmistakable. Here's a
Right.
dead guy to tell you the truth. You know,
Yeah.
this is very well reality. My question isn't whether this was real or was this Samuel. My question is, was this woman doing this in the power of evil sorcery? I don't think any of us on this conversation would ever believe that a person on this earth in any capacity could outperform the power of God. God is allowing this to happen one way or another. I think the question becomes, there clearly are biblical references to people practicing sorcery and witchcraft against God. Whether he allows it or not, that's the perfect will discussion. It's outside of the scope of this, but the gray area is, this is supernatural to me. She just crossed a plane. Whether God allowed it or not, she just crossed a plane from the living to the dead.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is just straight up, you can't argue supernatural. It does exist.
Right.
And the point I was making before that is, she had done it before. She was sought out for her abilities, so she had clearly done it before. So
yeah,
that for the purposes of this discussion, yes, this is supernatural. And the other reference I'm going to give is to the sorcerer conversation, and I'm trying to find it real quick. I think I had it right beside it. There was a sorcerer that had bewitched an entire town. Forget his name. I've got like 14 tabs open. I'm trying to find it again, but y'all probably are familiar with it. But this one was much simpler to put. This guy had a reputation of, he had bewitched a town. They were following him. He was clearly doing this against God. You know, it was of an evil nature because they were preaching against it. They were saying all divinators, all sorcerers, all witchcraft. So I guess just to wrap this up in a neat little bow, we're talking about there are humans who practice things that cross into the supernatural realm that are not of God. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh, you agree?
Yeah.
So
at some point, somebody's going to have to disagree with something.
Yeah. Well, here's the part. So we agree that it happens. The question is, how does it happen? Does it happen in God's perfect will? Does it happen in God put it into motion and it's happening just because it happens and there's evil in the world? Why? Why are people allowed to operate outside of or operate in the supernatural against God?
No, I'm not going to speak for God.
Oh,
because
couldn't if you wanted to.
That's not my lane. But I think one of the reasons that God allows these kinds of things is because these are the things that in the end he's going to conquer and is going to bring glory to him.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I like that.
That's good.
A good
That's
perspective.
Good. Yeah.
Josh, what's your thoughts? Why are people allowed to operate outside of the natural world against God?
My thought process runs along the same side as Rob, is that in the end God is going to conquer this. But I do think one important thing to look at is that, you know, you've mentioned this several times, that, you know, Disney and Hollywood have done such a good job of making magic and sorcery entertainment. Like, for example, you think of the Halloween Town movies that Disney put out.
Yeah.
You think of the Marvel franchise with the bringing in of the Scarlet Witch. That's seen as, you know, entertainment. It's seen as cool. You know, you envy being able to do that. But I think, you know, looking at the biblical text and seeing that these things have actually happened, and understanding that there's, you know, that what I think that it shows is that there actually is a spiritual battle that goes on that most of us do not see, or in some instances notice. And it's a good way to remind us and show us that there are things that are going on that are definitely very far outside of our control, that we're not in, that can affect us. But in the end, the amazing thing is that God's going to overcome this, and it's going to be used for his glory at some point. It may not seem like it right now, but at some point it will be used for his glory.
Yeah, there's no argument there for sure. And I'm not going to dig in deep because I think we've covered it pretty well. But some good examples of this would be like your hoodoo and your voodoo down in New Orleans, and in Africa you've got witch doctors, medicine men,
Right.
things like this. I think all of these cross into the territory of people doing things that they really shouldn't be doing and playing in things they shouldn't be playing in. But I'm going to circle back for a second, and we're going to. I hope this will wrap this up because I think we've really delved into a lot of areas, and this may spawn some other conversations. But I want to go back to the Nephilim. The reason I held off until the end on this one, because this one's going to be kind of weird. So I want to explain where I'm at on this. So I'm going to go to a specific scenario: Egyptian mythology, Egyptian gods. So name a few: Ra,
Iris,
Anubis. Horus, Anubis, blah, 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 blah. We're going to start with Ra because that's the obvious. That's the top of the food chain for them. I've always had this weird feeling that maybe Ra was a god, not the god, lowercase god, and maybe, just hypothetically, could this guy have been a Nephilim or something equivalent to a Nephilim? Could this guy have been a crossbred angel who exhibited some superpowers by most people's standards, and because of that, people worshipped him and gave him stature that he didn't deserve? Did it put him on the plane of God? No. Did it put him above God? Absolutely not. But did it put him on the plane of angels?
I mean, you're also looking at that. You can also go to the followers of Baal.
Exactly. Yeah, like the Bible preaches Baal as a false god. Well, by strict definition, he is. But what I'm saying is, could he have been, by most people's, spiritual sight, an angelic god of sorts? So I've always thrown that out there, and people are like, "You're an idiot." I'm like, maybe I am. I don't know, but I like Egyptian mythology. I just like it. I'm a curious person. But when I see Ra and I see this guy that they worship that supposedly controlled the sun, obviously they don't control the sun. But my point is, they could make it look like they control the sun. An angelic being. To your point, Josh, when an angel, and yours, Rob's as well, when an angelic being was exposed, people freaked out. It's probably because we can't perceive their nature, their true nature, because like God, he can't be exposed to sin. We can't see his face or we'll die. Maybe an angel is like a lower level of that. Like if we truly see their true nature, we die. So that's why I see when people bowing on their faces and freaking out and they're saying, "Do not be afraid," is I can't perceive them naturally. So pretend one of those exists on the earth and doesn't quite have the full power of an angel, but has some of it. I could see a lot of people bowing down and being like, he's the sun god,
Well, even so, when was it Gabriel that came down and they tried to worship him, and he said, "No,
don't do that. Stupid.
Don't do that." That was Gabriel, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was one of them.
Yeah.
So you're looking at angels. People are falling on their faces and worshiping angels, and they're like, "No, no, 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 no." Well, think about a fallen angel
who's not going to be directed to God.
Exactly. Whose whole purpose is to be treated as God.
Yeah, it just makes me go back and look at some of these historical figures that were gods, and could this be an explanation for them? Could they be angels on earth or crossbred angels? I want to say inbred, but that's not right. Josh, what's your thought on that?
I don't know. I definitely think it's possible. I don't know if I would completely agree that that's what it was.
Hey, we finally got to disagree.
Yeah. Say like I'm not going to completely disagree and
So
say
who do you
here's
think
why you're wrong, blah 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 blah. Honestly,
mythological being didn't exist.
Yeah. When you look, my understanding, and like your fascination with Egyptian mythology is my same with Greek and Roman mythology. I love, I just enjoyed learning about how the Romans and the Greeks thought that the world worked with the different gods over everything. Anyway, I do think that most of it is mythological beings that did not exist, that they just created to help explain different events that were to have happened. One example of, why they thought that there could have been a sun god in Egypt is there could have been a lunar or solar eclipse. And, the sun looked to have been, partially obstructed. And they thought that, we've angered some kind of god. So we need to, create something to worship him so that he doesn't do that to us again. Yeah, I don't know if I would say that they were real. More or less, I would just say that they were probably fictitious, mythological being gods, little g, that were created by these different peoples to explain basically how the world revolved and worked.
So, in your view, a fallen angel roams the earth. You don't believe that they could have posed potentially themselves as gods?
I think they could have. I
But you don't
just,
think they did for the most part? That it was
I
just
don't think
mostly
for them.
man's ignorance?
I think mostly it was just. It's like what one of the commentators, talks about how the heart is an idol factory, and we
Yeah.
there's always that empty hole in all of us that's we're looking for something bigger than us, and being able to create a god that services your needs in that time, to be able to give you, to kind of take the blame and the responsibility off yourself and to put it on something else. I think
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that's mostly where it comes from.
I think you're either going to go A or B when you find something you can't explain. You're either going to go logic, i.e.,
Yeah.
science, or you're going to go faith, i.e., being, or some supernatural or something like that. So, yeah, I fully align with that. I will say this. I'll give you two quick
It's
props.
Calvin.
One,
It's Calvin. It's Calvin that said the heart is an idol factory. It's Calvin. It was
yeah, I
bugging
knew
me
that was
that
probably going to eat at your
it was bugging me.
mind.
It was bugging me that I couldn't remember who it was. It was Calvin.
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for bringing the first official disagreement. Second, I'd like to say you're fired.
Well, it's been a good run. Now everybody knows my name, and fired.
Yeah, and address.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Anyway, I'm going to throw it out there. You got any
Pennsylvania.
other thoughts on any of this? Any other future endeavors we want to look into on this as we wrap it up?
There's always different questions to look at with this stuff, but I think we did a really good job of kind of covering the broad strokes. There's definitely
I'd like
more
to
here we
dig
could
in
dive.
more
There's
specifically on the
definitely more to,
Nephilim for sure.
if we wanted to dig in on things. I think it would be helpful to have someone on that has studied this quite, regularly. If we could find us someone who knows a little bit more about this than us.
I've got a couple of people in mind. We'll reach out.
Yeah, that would be good.
I liked
Maybe
what we covered though.
Yeah, you made me
Rob,
think.
you got
So
anything
appreciate
else you want to bring up?
The last note is how all this fits into God's perfect will, His creation plan, and His ultimate design. We didn't touch that at all.
They're not supposed to know we use notes.
How would you run something like this without notes, though?
All extemporaneous.
Yeah, and I think we hinted at that.
6-syllable word, dude. You just won.
That's a fake word. That was like
I'm telling you.
supercalifragilistic. But yeah, to your point, we've kind of hinted at that as we've gone along. But yeah, if we want to wrap it up real clean with a bow, how does this fit? Is I think there are biblical references that prove that we do have supernatural. It does exist. It exists both from a human perspective and from things that are just biblically referenced that we don't know enough about. I'd like to hear your thought on that, but to me, I've said it before, and we'll cover it again in another episode. I am a believer that God set the world in motion, entered the world, and while God has the capability to interact with everything all the time, I don't believe that God necessarily actively does it. I am not there are people that disagree with me, and I'm willing to accept that, but that's my viewpoint, is the whole ant farm methodology. I think he lets it happen and interacts when he needs to, but there's a flip side to that. Rob, what were you saying about it? What's your thoughts?
My thought is it's like I said earlier, it's all going to bring glory to him in the end. So when we have normal people conquering supernatural beasts, let's just say David and Goliath. Yeah. Well, that brought glory to God right there. A lot of it, and that's probably one of the most famous stories in the Bible.
So you're saying Goliath was a supernatural beast, in your opinion?
Oh yeah, he was a giant. I mean, it says right there he was a giant.
Yeah, but by most standards, he was roughly 9 feet. I'm not saying I know that. I'm just saying that's what scholars have said. There's a guy in Asia that's the tallest man in the world right now that is 9 feet. So could have been human. I'm just saying, but I agree from the point of this episode, he could have been supernatural too.
And when you're talking
Second
about
disagreement.
anything like that, I like it.
Expand on it.
Now
quick.
you're fired. No. Wait, that just leaves me. Can't do this by myself. I think that when people get put in seemingly impossible situations, dealing with things, whether it be Jonah getting eaten by the giant fish, or whether it be David slaying Goliath with a rock, or Jesus casting legion into the herd of pigs. These are all things that teach us dependence on God is the only way to get through. And I think that gives him the glory. So I'm going to say, as far as his perfect plan, I'm going to say it all fits right in there. I mean, this is something that's going to bring him glory in the end.
I can get behind that. His plan, we know biblically how it ends. So his plan is there and he is perfect. Therefore, it is a perfect plan. I guess my disagreement comes that whether he is active in every aspect of it, every millisecond of every day. I don't want to remove his power. He can be, but is he? Is he interacting with me on a minutia detail? So that's one that I think we'll all kind of have our feelings on one way or the other. Anyway, Josh, you got anything else?
No, I'm like I said, I am a firm believer that all things happen because God is going to bring himself glory through all things. And so no matter what it is, no matter what happens, no matter how it happens, some way or another, we're going to see the glory of God shine through it.
Absolutely. Well, I want to take a moment to kind of finalize this one out. Where we went a little longer on this one. We figured we probably would. This was a deeper topic, and we hope some of these topics do produce this. But we want to leave some of this for future episodes. So we're going to wrap it up at that. And basically just say we hope you enjoyed this. If you have any comments, if you want to see us dive in deeper on any of this, feel free to let us know in the comments. Send us an email, info@budgetworship.com, and let us know how you feel. Anyway, thanks and God bless.